So, vielen Dank für sprechen Sie auch Englische today. My Deutsche is after. Okay. I am producer Dwayne Hopkins, which is very important for me to stress. I'm not Dwayne, and I'm not going to speak in the way that Volker did as the artist. I'm going to speak from my position as someone who produces for an artist and a filmmaker, why I do this, and what Dwayne's done in the past and what he's looking to do in the future. So Dwayne is very interested, and this is one of the reasons why I want to work with him, very interested in the obligations of space. So the obligation of, as Stephanie said before, the black box and the white cube, in a way, traditionally has been very, very different. And this, you can frame in one sense by saying the contract you have with the audience of each particular space is kind of different. In the black box, people go expecting a certain narrative, a certain curvature, a certain story perhaps, not always, but perhaps. And also you expect them or you hope that they'll sit there for 70, 80, 90, 120 minutes, whatever the length of the film may be. The white cube, the contract with the audience is more transient, therefore you're not tied down to certain thematic or structural issues in the moving image work that one makes. What I think is interesting, and one of the things that drives me to work with Dwayne, is when these differentiations between those spaces and the obligations to them start to crumble, something new is made. Something different can evolve from this very formal black box, white cube idea. So Dwayne is a filmmaker. He is, I'll tell you a little story, a little bit about how he started making his first short film, which I think was mentioned last night for those of you that came, played here 10 years ago in Hamburg. And Dwayne, even when we made a student film together, Dwayne writes a script and does some storyboards, key scenes, and he has an idea of what his narrative is going to be, and thinking about the black box. But when he shoots, he always shoots around this. He always gathers more information and more stuff, images, than he needs just for a simple story. And I think, from my perspective, there's a couple of reasons why he does this. First of all, I think when you write a film, what you see in your head is never the reality of when you turn up on day one and, interior, X factory, building, cafeteria, whatever it might be, and it doesn't look like it looked like 3 years ago when you wrote that first scene. So, even though you've scouted and done location recce's and so on, and the guys that you've cast never exactly look like the kids who you originally thought when you wrote those first lines of dialogue or whatever it might be. So, what's so interesting about his practice is, he's there to shoot fiction, but he also gathers images, gathers material which he puts in the bank. Stuff that he knows, he has a shot list and he storyboards, like say, which allows him to come away with a film that certain perhaps people who've given him money to make a film require. But he also has a wealth of other material which he can then go and manipulate and use and do something different with. So, this is on the website actually. I'm just going to play a couple of, I was placing these while I talk. Oh, it's all dark. Can you turn the lights down? It's a little bit dark on there, but that's okay. So, when we were making Field, that film that was here 10 years ago, we shot so much material around the boys. They're improvising, they didn't know the script per se, so they were kind of bringing a lot. Glenn was finding a lot around the material that he found interesting, that he wanted to explore. And as my job as a producer, I have to then have different relationship with the AD department, with the financiers and all this kind of thing, because people don't, and specifically like the camera team and the electrical team, people, when we're working on set with Dwayne, you don't just turn up and shoot the shot list and out you go and all the rest of it. Things evolve on the day. And I know that will happen on other fiction films, but with Dwayne, he's not just shooting the shot list. So I'll just carry on talking while James is cycling. So yeah, he's shooting around what he finds, what he sees, things that he finds interesting, almost in more a way as a documentarist or a photographer would work. Dwayne is also a photographer and has banks of images that he's currently editing, so on and so on. But what's interesting for me is that you come away with a fiction film, people have, but you also have all this other stuff. So when we made Field, we also had Sunday, which ended up over the time after Field had played the festivals and won a couple of awards and been here and there and put Dwayne on the map as a filmmaker, he started investigating the rest of the industry. Started making pieces like this. Of course, you have James riding forwards forever. You can just as easily ride backwards forever in perpetuity. And Dwayne became interested in the idea of playing with the form. So, just quickly try and put the lines up. You'll see what I mean. So, form. It's very dark, but it's three images knitted together to create one single image. Of course, when Dwayne started showing some of this work to one or two people, they became interested in putting it in galleries, which was always the intention. Some of this stuff works with slight narrative, but it's all always looped. Some projected, some on screens, this kind of thing. So Dwayne was putting work in galleries, and we kind of then hooked onto the idea that all this actually makes sense. It all squares the circle, if you like, that you're making a fiction film, but you have ancillary material from which you make other artifacts which can be screened in another environment. What you're doing is you're creating a multi-platform world. Now, what is also interesting is Harry Potter has a game that goes with it to make money, and Spider-Man has a doll to go with it to make money. This is what is, certainly in the British press, this is what multi-platform is sort of termed as, these ancillary, commercially driven elements around a central project. Well, what I find interesting about Dwayne's practice is the reason he's making these other things is from an artistic point of view. It's driven artistically, it's not driven commercially. And actually, there's some sort of academic benefit to this because it's a different approach to a similar thing. Eventually, perhaps there may be some commercial gain through audience nurturing and so on and so on. But the idea when we did the feature film called Better Things, we made a whole casting period of several months. We met thousands of people, took photographs, made interviews, videos with these people. And then when we cast 23 characters, we put all this creative process away in a box with tapes and photos. We didn't touch it again, and we carried on and we made the film. And Dwayne said to me, you know what, next time I do a feature, like we did with the rushes, or some of the rushes we picked up when we were shooting Field, I'm going to use the process of making a film to make several different artifacts. So, with the new feature film, we're going to make gallery installation work from casting process, perhaps a photography project from location work, and so on and so on. And this then will allow a multi-platform exposure for an artist whose real cinematic audience perhaps lies more at the tape than it does the multiplex. So it makes sense to try and nurture the audience that is already going to galleries and so on. to bring them to the other work and vice versa. So if you're able to exhibit a project which is heavily related to your feature film in the months before its release, it's about engendering that work. It stands alone and it's separate, and I have to make sure that the contracts for the work are separate. The people who pay for the feature film wouldn't necessarily then own the rights to the gallery installations and so on and so on. I think that's quite an important distinction to make from my point of view, because if they have a casting tape, for example, and the film council or the BFI as they now are, or the TV channel say, well, we own this material, we couldn't then necessarily exploit it in another way. But then lies the future of what Dwayne's practice is looking to do, which is to go on a journey. Every time he makes a project, it's not just a film, and it's not just an installation, and it's not perhaps just a series of photographs. Dwayne's an image gallery. He makes stuff which personally I find extremely moving, which is why I want to allow him the arena in which to work and create that arena in which for him to work. So to make sure the crew around him are more like a family rather than just jobbing people. I have to make sure financiers understand where he's coming from and why. And I guess, sort of to sum up, I don't want to go on too much longer, to sum up this, I was talking to some people from Cannes back in Rotterdam about the new idea for the new film, to bring the ideas that Dwayne's been having together to make one whole project, a little bit in the way perhaps that Peter Pong did with the Primitives project, and the feature element of that was Uncle Boon Me. And I was chatting to these guys, and they said, well, this looks great, and I showed them some of this stuff, literally just on my laptop in the pub late at night, and they were saying, we're going to try and hook you up with a gallery in Paris and so on, and then I didn't hear anything, and then the next thing I knew, I get a phone call in April saying, we're going to put Cigarette at Night on in the Kanzen, which is kind of strange, because then it's, you make the film, you shoot around the film to make some artworks, and then those artworks go into galleries, and then eventually you show them back to some film people, and they say they want to put it back in the cinema, which was a bit odd, because then we had to have Cigarette at Night, as you saw it last night, with a start and an end, and not on a loop, because it's kind of a different project when you watch it 3 or 4 times and you engage with it in a slightly different way, to having a title card, Cigarette Night, and an end card, a film by Dwayne Hopkins, which gives it this definitive sort of black box feel. So I just thought it was a really interesting cycle for the piece. And of course, these rushes were shot quite some time ago, but Dwayne's practice allows them to keep on giving, if you like, to audiences around the world and so on. And this only helps nurture that audience for his future work. And I think that's about long and short of where I am. So I guess we'll engage with questions and conversations later.